Friends, gather round, for we're about to delve into a tale so bizarre, so audacious, it could only spring from the mind of one Donald J. Trump. That's right, folks. The former president is back in the headlines, and this time he's got his sights set on Alcatraz Island. Forget luxury condos or golf courses. Trump's latest venture is a blast from the past. He wants to reopen the infamous prison. You know, the one that housed notorious gangsters like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. The inescapable fortress surrounded by frigid, shark-infested waters. Yeah, that one. Trump, in his infinite wisdom, believes that bringing back Alcatraz is the answer to America's crime woes. He envisions it as a supermax prison, a place to send the baddest of the bad, the criminals who strike fear into the hearts of even the bravest citizens. Now, you might be thinking, John, isn't this a bit extreme? I mean, Alcatraz closed down decades ago for a reason, and you'd be right, my friend, but logic and reason have never been Trump's strong suits, have they? Ah, Alcatraz. Just the name conjures up images of cold steel bars, clanging cell doors, and hardened criminals plotting their next move, and for good reason. For nearly 3 decades, from 1934 to 1963, Alcatraz served as America's most notorious maximum security prison. Perched on a desolate island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz was the ultimate symbol of isolation and punishment. Surrounded by treacherous currents and icy waters, escape seemed impossible. At least that was the idea. Over the years, Alcatraz housed some of the most infamous criminals in American history. Al Capone, the notorious Chicago gangster, spent 4.5 years on the Rock. George Machine Gun Kelly, a notorious kidnapper, also called Alcatraz home for a spell. Life on Alcatraz was harsh, even by prison standards. Inmates endured long hours of solitary confinement, meager rations, and brutal treatment from guards. Escape attempts were frequent, but few were successful. The most famous attempt, the Battle of Alcatraz in 1946, resulted in the deaths of 2 guards and 3 inmates. Fast forward to the present day, and Alcatraz is a far cry from its grim past. Gone are the hardened criminals and the oppressive atmosphere of fear. In their place, you'll find throngs of tourists snapping selfies and soaking up the island's eerie history. Yes, folks, Alcatraz has undergone a remarkable transformation. After closing its doors as a prison in 1963, the island sat vacant for several years. Then, in 1972, it reopened as part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Today, Alcatraz is one of San Francisco's most popular tourist attractions, drawing millions of visitors each year. Tourists flock to the island to explore the abandoned prison, learn about its infamous history, and enjoy stunning views of the city skyline. But this popularity comes at a cost. Maintaining Alcatraz as a tourist destination is an expensive endeavor. The island requires constant upkeep, and the cost of ferrying visitors back and forth adds up quickly. In fact, it's estimated that it costs millions of dollars each year to keep Alcatraz afloat. So, how does one go about reopening a defunct island prison? Well, if you're Donald Trump, you simply pick up the phone and bark out some orders. That's right, folks, the former president has apparently appointed himself warden-in-chief of this whole Alcatraz 2.0 operation. Trump has reportedly instructed a whole slew of government agencies to get cracking on this harebrained scheme. The Bureau of Prisons, the Department of Justice, the FBI, even the Department of Homeland Security, they've all been roped into this bureaucratic circus. Now, to be fair, none of these agencies seem particularly thrilled about this whole thing. The Bureau of Prisons, for instance, has been remarkably tight-lipped about the logistical nightmare that is reopening Alcatraz. And who can blame them? It's not like they've got a spare island prison lying around, just waiting for a fresh coat of paint and a few dozen orange jumpsuits. Section 5. Like father, like son, a family affair with incarceration. This wouldn't be a proper Trump saga without a cameo appearance from the prodigal son himself, Don Jr. And wouldn't you know it, Jr.'s got some thoughts on Alcatraz too. You see, back in the halcyon days of January 2025, when the biggest news story was whether or not Baby Yoda was actually a clone, Don Jr. took to the internet to share his wisdom with the world. His suggestion? Reopen Alcatraz. Now, at the time, Jr. wasn't talking about sending hardened criminals to the Rock. No, his target was slightly different, undocumented immigrants. Yes, you heard that right. Don Jr., in all his infinite wisdom, thought it would be a grand idea to ship undocumented immigrants off to a desolate island prison. Of course, this isn't the first time the Trump family has floated some rather unorthodox ideas about immigration. Let's not forget the whole send them all back to Mexico debacle. Or the time Trump Sr. suggested building a moat filled with alligators along the southern border. Section $6.00. Can Alcatraz pay for itself? Now let's talk Turkey for a moment, shall we? Because even if you set aside the ethical quagmire that is imprisoning people on a desolate island, there's still the small matter of money. And let's just say, reopening Alcatraz is going to cost a pretty penny. Remember all those tourists flocking to Alcatraz? Well, they bring in a lot of dough, millions of dollars each year, in fact. Money that helps maintain the island, pay the park rangers, and keep the ferries running. Money that would vanish overnight if Alcatraz were to revert back to a prison. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Reopening Alcatraz would require a massive investment in infrastructure. We're talking about renovating dilapidated buildings, upgrading security systems, and building a whole new ferry terminal. And let's not forget about the ongoing costs of staffing the prison, feeding the inmates, and providing medical care. Section 7. Not so fast. Critics cry foul on Alcatraz plan. Unsurprisingly, Trump's grand plan to resurrect Alcatraz hasn't exactly been met with universal acclaim. In fact, it's safe to say that most people think it's a terrible idea. And by most people, I mean everyone who isn't a card-carrying member of the Trump fan club. Politicians, historians, even former prison wardens have all come out swinging against the Alcatraz proposal. They cite a whole laundry list of reasons why this is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad idea. For starters, there's the whole issue of practicality. Reopening Alcatraz would be a logistical nightmare. It's an island, for crying out loud. How are you going to transport prisoners to and from the mainland? What about supplies, medical emergencies? Then there's the cost. As we've already established, reopening Alcatraz would be a financial black hole. It would cost taxpayers a fortune, and for what? To lock up a few dozen criminals in a dilapidated island prison? Section 8. Getting tough on crime, a familiar tune. So why is Trump so hell-bent on reopening Alcatraz? Well, to understand that, you need to understand that man's MO. You see, Trump has built his entire political career on fear-mongering and exploiting people's anxieties, and nothing gets people riled up quite like the specter of crime. Throughout his time in the public eye, Trump has consistently painted himself as the law and order candidate. He's the one who's going to crack down on criminals, get tough on gangs, and make America safe again. And what better symbol of this tough-on-crime stance than Alcatraz? The reopening of Alcatraz is a blatant attempt to tap into that fear and present himself as the savior of a nation teetering on the brink of chaos. It's a cynical ploy, but it's one that's worked for him before. Section 9. Symbolism or substance? The Alcatraz question. So here we are, folks, at the crux of the matter. Is reopening Alcatraz a practical solution to America's complex criminal justice problems? Of course not. It's a logistical nightmare, a financial black hole, and a PR disaster waiting to happen. But none of that really matters, does it? Because Alcatraz isn't about practicality or logic, it's about symbolism, it's about sending a message. For Trump, Alcatraz is a symbol of strength, of his unwavering commitment to law and order. It's a way to show the world that he's not afraid to crack down on criminals, even if it means resurrecting a relic of a bygone era. But for many Americans, Alcatraz represents something else entirely. It's a reminder of a dark chapter in our history, a time when we locked people away and threw away the key. The question is, what message do we want to send? Do we want to be known as a nation that embraces compassion and rehabilitation, or do we want to return to the days of isolation and punishment?